We have a big show for you tonight. On tonight's show, we have Jayson Stark, who is a MLB reporter for ESPN.com. So, Jayson, how are you doing tonight?
I'm great. How about you?
Good. How are you enjoying this off season?
There's not a lot of off in off season for people like us, but that's fine. I love my job. I love all seasons of the year and all aspects of it.
Yeah. So let me ask you, how many books have you wrote?
How many books have I written?
Yeah.
I have written 3 books. The most recent was kind of a greatest hits collection. That was called Wild Pitches. I'm from Philadelphia. Wrote a book that kind of chronicled the Phillies winning the World Series, breaking the Philadelphia title drought. That was called Worth the Wait. And I wrote a book on the most overrated and underrated baseball players of all time.
Wow.
And that was called The Stark Truth.
Oh.
Thanks for asking. They're available everywhere books are sold.
Okay. So, how did you like writing them, and what did you like most about doing that?
Well, all those books were a different sort of experience. In the Phillies book, in the Wild Pitches book, a significant portion of those books were, involved repackaging and, in some cases, rewriting things I'd already written. The overrated, underrated book was a really fun experience. And people still talk about it and argue with me about that book. It was written on a really tight time frame, involved extensive research. I had a blast doing it. It was a very different experience than writing columns, writing blogs, writing magazine stories, all the stuff I'd done up till then. It takes an incredible amount of discipline to write a book, but there's nothing like it. There's nothing like that experience of being immersed in the writing of a book, being committed to having to make progress on it every day, to having fun with it, to telling people things they didn't know. And then the best part of all, of course, is when you actually get a chance to hold that book in your hands, do those book signings, interact with people at the book signings, and hear their stories and tell them your stories. It's really a unique experience to write a book, and I'm really glad that I've had that opportunity to write 3 of them now.
So like you said, you grew up in Philadelphia, so growing up, were you a big baseball fan?
I was. One of the stories that I tell in the Wild Pitches book was how from the time I was maybe 10 years old, I decided that I wanted to be a sports writer and be a baseball writer. In that book, I tell the story about how hanging on my wall in my office is a photo of me and my sister walking home from school. And I am in 5th grade, she's in 4th grade. And underneath the photo is a little composition that she wrote for her 4th grade class that says something to the effect of, if you ever want to know anything about baseball, you should ask my brother. So from the time I was really a young kid, I'd go to games, I'd bring my binoculars, and I would look at the press box, trying to figure out what everybody was doing up there. And so I'm one of those lucky people in the world who's living the dream, doing exactly what I always dreamed of doing.
So now let's talk about the baseball team. So going back, do you see the teams that have gone back to square one, like the Tigers, A's, and Phillies? So do you see these teams making the playoffs in the next few years?
Well, all these teams are in different positions. I wrote a piece recently about the 4 teams that are in the most aggressive rebuilding mode, and I think some people in the game use the word tanking. I don't think we're going to use that word because it carries a lot of connotations with it that we don't need to get into. But the Phillies, the Braves, the Reds, the Brewers, I would say none of them is making any pretense that they're ready to win the World Series this year. And the question is, how long is their rebuild going to take? Don't know the answer to that yet. I think the Braves are probably the closest. They're trying to will happen in 2017. And I think at one time they were hoping, hey, we'll be good when we get to that stadium. I think now they're more realistic about it and think we'll be good whenever we get good. Mm-hmm. But they have a number of high-end pitching prospects who are not that far away. So I think you can foresee a scenario where by 2018 the Braves are ready to win again. And the Phillies are ahead of the Reds and Brewers right now, too, because the Reds and Brewers are doing more of the tearing down. The Phillies are getting to the point now where they're starting to build back up again. And by the trades they've made, I think it's safe to say that they're a team that has much better depth to their system and their prospect base than they had 6 months ago, a year ago, certainly 2 years ago. They've gone from a bottom 10 system to a top 10 system. What they need now is star power, difference makers. They've got the number 1 pick in the draft this year. They've got a lot of international money to play with. If you get back to me in a year, I think I'll be able to tell you how close the Phillies are. If you have any other specific teams that you're wondering about, fire away.
The Tigers?
Oh, the Tigers are really an interesting team. One of the most fascinating teams in baseball. They're going to have a record payroll. They're going to pay luxury tax. They have, I think it's 7 players under contract for $135 million, which means it's hard to construct a roster that way. But they have tremendous star power. They also have age and health issues. And so they're a team I think you could see winning the AL Central this year, or you could see a lot of things going wrong. And, I mean, their window, because the age of their team, is not that great. So going forward, they've got a difficult model. This year, it's a really intriguing team.
Mm-hmm. So who do you think the guy will be picked up, these guys, the free agents this year? I can't get over how many guys are still not signed. Like the one guy, Ian Desmond. Who do you think will sign this guy in the next few weeks?
Who do I think will sign Ian Desmond?
Yes.
Well, I mean, the fact that it's the first week of February and he doesn't have a contract tells you that there's no easy answer to that question. Mm-hmm. You know, Ian Desmond was a guy who a year ago thought he was going to be a $100 million player. Mm-hmm. And he knows now that's not happening. And so he's really basically begging the Rays to sign him for a year because he's from the area. Mm-hmm. And that's not out of the question. The problem is that the Rays don't want to give up the 13th pick in the draft as compensation. So it really wouldn't surprise me if we get into spring training and he's not signed, if he waits until the season and then signs so he's not subject to another compensation pick next year. Mm-hmm. That could happen. But he's had of all the big-name players out there, I don't think anybody's had a tougher offseason than him.
Mm-hmm. So why do you think the Nationals didn't want to re-sign Ian?
Oh, I think they've known for some time that they were not going to re-sign him. Mm-hmm. I don't think that was something that they decided over this winter. Look, they obviously put themselves or put the shortstop of their future, maybe really near future, into place when they traded for Trey Turner. Mm-hmm. And he's going to be the guy now. So to sign Ian Desmond would really just block Trey Turner. Mm-hmm. So I don't think that there's any ill feelings. It's just business. And they tried to extend him. They offered him $100 million. He said no. I think they knew right then they had a plan for the future, so they did that, and that future is not going to include him.
Mm-hmm. So there are some problems going down in Washington. So how do you think the Nationals can fix those problems in the next few months?
Well, I'm not sure exactly what problems you're referring to, but when I look at the Nationals, I see a team that's still one of the 3 or 4 most talented teams in the National League, and a lot of what went wrong there last year wasn't necessarily about talent. It was about off the field. It was about how the pieces fit together. And in some ways, they've had a tough offseason, targeted number of big names that they couldn't sign, didn't sign, tried to trade for, couldn't make that work. didn't even hire the manager that they originally offered the job to. Tried to hire Bud Black, wound up with Dusty Baker, but in a lot of ways, I think Dusty's a good fit for that team. Players love playing for him, and I think he will help stabilize that clubhouse. And you give that team a stable clubhouse with the talent level there, I think a lot of people are underestimating what the Nationals could be this year.
Mm-hmm. Okay, last question here before we wrap up this interview. I had Ken Rosenthal on my show yesterday, and he said in the AL East, the Boston Red Sox were the most improved team. Do you agree with that statement? And if you do you see the Red Sox doing better than they did last year after signing David Price, that #1 starter that everyone said they needed last year?
Well, I think they're probably the most improved team in the sport.
Okay.
They added the best starting pitcher on the market in David Price. They added the best relief pitcher on the market in Craig Kimbrell. They added a really important bullpen piece in Carson Smith. They're going to be a lot better. But to be honest with you, I would still pick the Blue Jays. I prefer the Blue Jays offensively and defensively, and I think the Blue Jays have more pitching depth. They don't have the proven #1 that the Red Sox have. But if Marcus Stroman is ready to be that guy, I still think Toronto is the team to beat in that division.
Mm-hmm. And one more question here. Do you see the Yankees doing a little bit better than they did last year now that they have Chapman?
Well, they made the playoffs last year.
Yep.
Let's remember that. They're going to have one of the most awesome bullpens we've ever seen, assuming that Chapman isn't suspended for a long period of time because of the domestic abuse charges. But trying to evaluate the Yankees is incredibly difficult, I think, because they have so many health questions, especially in their rotation, age questions, especially in their lineup. They're probably the team that has the biggest swing between what they can be if things go right and what they can be if things go wrong. They could win the AL East. They could finish 4th. It's all going to be a function of health, good fortune, and who makes the best deals in July. So stay tuned on that.
Okay, Mr. Thark, I want to say thank you for taking the time and coming on here as the off-season coming up, and we got to go down to Florida pretty soon, right?
Yeah, spring training, pitchers and catchers report 2 weeks from today, my friend. So
I'm excited.
Makes you feel warmer already.